Hello, everyone. This is Michael Smith from Red Lake. I want to welcome everyone to our co-sponsored, our co-seminar with Illumio. Today, we're going to be talking about your three-stage zero trust plan. All right. Hopefully, everyone can hear me okay. Anyone having any issues hearing? If you are, just speak up in the chat, please. Well, since it's quiet and no one's speaking up, that sounds like good news. So let's go ahead and move on. So most of you here are Red Lake customers. So those of you who aren't, Red Lake's been around for about 12 years. We're a Chicago-based veteran-owned company specializing in security services. We offer services around a multitude of different areas, including advisory services, so virtual CISO, tabletop exercises, governance, risk compliance. We offer managed security services in our co-managed security model, and then assessment services, pen testing, web app assessments, etc. So today our speakers are myself, Michael Smith. I'll be playing host and moderator. And I'd like to introduce Sam Rastogi, or I may have butchered that name completely. So Sam, I apologize if I did. Product Marketing Director at Illumio. Sam, would you like to say hi?
Hello, everyone, and really excited to spend the time today.
Wonderful to hear. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about what is zero trust, why we want to look at zero trust as a model. We're going to look at one of the what kind of started it all out, which is Forrester's Zero Trust Framework, implementing zero trust, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. So let's start out with what is zero trust and what it is not. Sam, would you like to kind of expound upon what zero trust is for the audience and explain what it isn't?
Sure, absolutely. So zero trust really spanned from the fact that, you know, if you take a step back and you see the headlines today, there's so many high-profile breaches that are occurring today. And the hackers or the bad guys themselves are really leveraging trust as a vulnerability, and they're exploiting that, and that's enabling them to get inside of your network. And what we find is once they're inside of the network and they gain access, they then have access to the critical crown jewels within your organization. So things like source code, if you're a software development shop, customer records, if you're a healthcare provider, health or patient information. It's really the critical information that if it falls in the wrong hands, it'll be detrimental to your business. So zero trust really stemmed from this concept that was introduced by Forrester about a decade ago, really charged with addressing the challenge and really eliminating that inherent trust that really makes us vulnerable to these types of increasingly external and internal attacks. So it's also focusing on enabling organizations to better segment and secure their underlying networks, as well as also giving them the ability to really protect that sensitive data and applications I was talking about earlier. So what I see when I talk to organizations is there's really a kind of some key concepts in terms of understanding what zero trust is. So the first tenet, if you will, with zero trust is actually a philosophy. It's a mindset, it's a strategy, as well as a framework that you can implement to ensure that you have the right set of security controls to really prevent against these disastrous types of breaches from impacting your organization. The other aspect is it requires you as an individual to think about your organization with the assumption that at some point in time, your networks, your borders will be breached, right? There will be a point in time when a bad actor will find its way inside of the network. And when you think about that, it will really then arm you to better enforce the right set of controls. The other aspect is when it comes to building security within your environment, you have to start from the inside. and focus on securing the data and applications, and then extend that out to the outside of your environment, right, to the users and devices. And then the last tenet I would talk about is that you should always ensure that you are enforcing zero trust from the very concept, right? Being able to ensure that everyone that's coming on the network, you're never simply trusting them, you're always verifying them. So I'll talk a little bit about what zero trust is and what it's not. So one of the sometimes myths that I hear from organizations when I speak to them is that there is this idea that if you're going to deploy zero trust, you have to be really explicit to who you are allowing inside of the network, and you're basically forbidding anyone else from entering. And that's actually not true. What you're actually doing with zero trust is you're actually building a default deny access scheme where you're really whitelisting the communication. So legitimate users must have access to the specific systems and applications that you have within the environment. And it's really based on least privilege. So it's a need-to-know basis. And you're really minimizing any instance where people are accessing your systems and applications where they shouldn't be accessing. The other fallacy that I hear oftentimes is that you need to have, and oftentimes you don't have enough visibility for people that are connecting on the external side of the network. And what we find is in order to enable zero trust, you need to be able to see equally well for all the users and connections that are connecting externally, as well as all the underlying connections inside of your network, inside of your environment. And so you need actually a full set of visibility across your on-prem or physical locations, but also in your cloud environment. And it must also extend across all of your workloads, whether they're running on bare metal servers, virtual machines, or even containers. The other myth I oftentimes hear is that when it comes to security controls, it's difficult to manage a consistent set of policies, and you need different sets of controls across each and every environment. Well, the key point here is what's really important is providing the consistency in security across all of your workloads. And it really requires the organization, regardless of where the workload is running, right? It may be in a physical data center. There may be a new process that's spanning in a public cloud, for instance, but you need to be able to very quickly take action and enforce it consistently wherever they run. I also hear, go ahead.
Sorry, Sam, I was going to ask you, do you think that a zero trust model will help increase security visibility across, say, infrastructure? Will it help in not only looking at it from that infrastructure type strategy, will it also help increase or implement a visibility strategy?
Yes, absolutely. So I will actually talk a little bit about the requirements, but visibility is actually one of the key tenets that you need in terms of addressing zero trust, because it starts, at the end of the day, it starts with having a visibility approach to see who the users are, what devices they're connecting, what applications, resources they're accessing. And so being able to not just see the traffic, but model your applications and workloads, and then enforce granular controls are really key aspects to how you can implement a zero trust model. The other part I was going to say is really the other aspect is when it comes to the perimeter, right? And oftentimes organizations have their firewalls deployed, and that's important. The perimeter is important, but what we're seeing more and more is that there is now increasing trends that are taking place where the workload is now becoming that new perimeter. And what I mean by that is you need to be able to extend those same set of controls not just from the borders of your network, closer to where your data and applications actually sit. And so microsegmentation is really a key requirement to really help you to stop that lateral movement. And so this is something where when you're looking to deploy zero trust, think about it in terms of, am I securing my borders? And then am I also able to extend those controls across my applications and workloads and really creating those micro perimeters?
Sounds good. All right, so let's move on to the next section. So Sam, leading into that, let's talk about why zero trust. What's the bottom line here? What do we gain from zero trust from a security perspective? And are there any other benefits to zero trust outside of security that would help from a getting management buy-in?
Sure. So, some of the biggest benefits of zero trust, and this is actually coming directly from Forrester, but what Forrester believes is when organizations implement an effective zero trust strategy, it can enable them to reduce their organization's risk exposure by 37% or more. What it also enables the organization to do is it also allows them to reduce the security costs by 31%. And this can really translate to a significant amount of savings because a good and effective zero trust strategy really helps to reduce those additional layers of security and really enables the security controls to work better across one another. The other aspect is, if you look at your environment today, we're seeing so much innovation that's taking place in the data center. We're seeing, for instance, that the network is now changing. It's becoming more agile. There's additional advantages in terms of IT efficiency, which is, for instance, with technologies like virtualization and software-defined networking, or even hyper-converged infrastructure that really allows the organization to quickly deliver workloads wherever they need to be, whether it's physical data centers or even multi-cloud environments. What this also now requires is the ability now to extend controls for those workloads across your environment, right? So at the perimeter where you will certainly have physical firewalls, but also extending that now across that east-west traffic, right? Wherever your applications and workloads are communicating, you need to now extend those controls there. And so being able to deploy and enforce a whitelist model will allow you to very quickly address those concerns and really map those new requirements. The other aspect is, when you think about who cares about zero trust, what we found is organizations that successfully deploy zero trust, we found that oftentimes it requires an internal champion. And the champion oftentimes comes from above the organization, right? It may be, for instance, the CEO or the CXO, where the executives are really looking at zero trust as a risk mitigation strategy to enable the organization to really prevent business impact, right? And importantly, ensuring that the organization's brand does not get tarnished, for instance, when a breach occurs. We also see, for instance, that it may even stem from a board initiative, right? The board of directors oftentimes have they have risk mitigation plans, and zero trust sometimes stems from that as an enterprise-wide initiative. We also see that even the line of business may be a champion for zero trust within the organization, and they're looking at zero trust as a business enabler. One organization I spoke to, they're a service provider, and so they're launching a new service, and they view implementing zero trust as a way to differentiate their service from other competitors in the market. And then we also see oftentimes that the CISO or the security operations team is oftentimes looking at zero trust in terms of a best-of-breed enterprise-wide strategy. And so they're looking at how they can reduce risk and threaten exposure or even address more effective controls for regulatory and compliance. Lastly, the network infrastructure teams oftentimes are the ones that implement Zero Trust, but they look at it in terms of, how can I address these sets of requirements as part of my data center transformation or SDN or a firewall refresh set of projects. So microsegmentation is oftentimes deployed as a way to really address and ensure a successful path for Zero Trust.
Very cool. All right. So let's go ahead and move to talk about Forrester's Zero Trust framework. So, I remember years ago I did a talk on Zero Trust myself, and I know things have changed a lot since that time period. Can you take us through what Forrester's Zero Trust framework kind of looks like? Tell us about the requirements
Sure.
and around that front.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the next slide will show the 5 pillars of Zero Trust, and I'll talk about each one. So Forrester's Zero Trust framework is a comprehensive security architecture and strategy that's really based upon these 5 pillars: network security, data security, workload application security, people or workforce security, as well as device security. And then on top of that, they have automation and orchestration that in essence tie everything all together through robust APIs. And then visibility and analytics is really there to really measure and continually monitor and adjust your security controls. So I'll talk about each of the 5 pillars. The first pillar is really about network security, and really what's required is to have a very comprehensive strategy around segmentation. So being able to provide a very hard perimeter, and this is certainly something organizations have today, right? These are physical firewalls oftentimes from vendors such as Palo Alto Networks, Checkpoint, Cisco, and others. But what's also required is the ability to extend those granular segmentation controls into that east-west traffic, right? Your server-to-server traffic. And this is where Illumio can really help the organization to really enable them to really very effectively and actually in a very simple way address their micro-segmentation requirements. And in fact, a large portion of our customers also leverage Illumio to enable rezoning. So what Illumio does is we really help organizations really drive visibility and enable them based upon what Illumio sees and how it enables you to operationalize your environment. You can now quickly program and automate the enforcement of whitelist policies. So it really requires an end-to-end approach to segmentation where you're looking at providing perimeter-level protections, which is oftentimes your physical firewalls, but really augmenting that with very granular east-west segmentation controls or microsegmentation. Now, data security is really about encrypting data that's in motion or that is or data at rest. And what Illumio does is that it enables organizations to really automate the encryption of data in motion. So we have a capability that's called Secure Connect, but it allows you to now quickly program the encryption across your servers. So from a host-to-host standpoint, we also automate and actually work directly with the perimeter firewalls that you have, and we can actually terminate an IPsec connection from any existing device like a firewall. In addition, what Forrester recommends is that you also deploy a data encryption at rest solution, and working with companies like Symantec really enable you to address that capability, as well as VPN termination, which are capabilities that you already have deployed oftentimes in your perimeter firewalls. Now, for workload and application security, what's really required is the ability to provide a very granular set of security controls down to all your workloads across bare metal servers, virtual machines, and containers. This is actually an area Illumio does very, very well. And we actually meet the entire security requirement for workloads and application security, because what we do is we secure all of the applications, all of the workloads, and those underlying application components, whether it is web servers, app servers, database servers, and we really enable you to now truly implement and enforce a very a granular approach using a whitelist-based policy. And then for people, this is really about securing your workforce, right? Enabling the ability to really see who the users are and what applications they're able to access. And Forrester recommends that organizations deploy a very rich set of identity and access management solutions. One of the companies they talk about in their Forrester Wave is IAM solutions from companies like Okta. And then in addition, Illumio works with solutions to extend very granular user-based segmentation controls. And this would be for users that are accessing resources and applications inside of the data center. And a good example of that would be enabling, for instance, enterprises to address their VDI security requirements. And we do that through a capability that's called adaptive user segmentation.
So,
and then finally,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yep. Oh, I was just going to say the last requirement is device controls. And this is about how you are securing how the users are connecting to the network and how they're accessing the resources. And this is where technologies like mobile device management or MDM come into play. Forrester recommends that organizations work with tools from MobileIron, for example, or even NAC solutions. And a company that was recommended was Forescout. And what Illumio does is we really focus on the visibility controls of the devices that are gaining access into the applications in the data center or in the cloud.
So, we heard a couple of the different infrastructure pieces that would be helpful for this. Obviously, micro application segmentation, IAM, even MDM, depending on the use case. What are some other infrastructure pieces that would have some value? Would things like SIM have value there? What are some other areas that you see, or other pieces of infrastructure you see being critical to a zero trust infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think SIM solutions are critical, and they should also get pulled in. At the end of the day, what you need for zero trust is an integrated architecture. So it should work, and the security control should tie into your SOC workflows. The other key aspect that Forrester talks about is having very rich, robust APIs. And that's also one of the key aspects in terms of what Illumio enables, is that you can quickly leverage an integrated platform and pull in additional security tools that you have. So you can pull in, for instance, your existing SIM. The reporting capabilities and actually data visualization can be directed, and even compliance-based reports can be automated through a SIM solution. On the device side, there's NAC and MDM solutions, as well as identity management. And then I would say the last piece is really the segmentation solutions that you have. So your perimeter firewalls as well as your micro segmentation solutions should all be tied together, so that way you can consistently enforce controls everywhere across your environment, from when users are connecting into the network, from when they're gaining access into the data center, from when they're trying to access specific applications, or they're moving laterally within your east-west traffic. You have the ability to really enforce those micro perimeter controls around the data.
So let me ask you this. Let's say some of our audience members wanted to implement Zero Trust framework, Zero Trust principles. Is it an all or nothing proposition, or is there a way that they can start out and work on it gradually to bring themselves into a full Zero Trust model?
Yeah, so Zero Trust is a strategy, it's a journey. One of the best ways to start is to really take a look at the data and workload side. One thing Forrester called out in their Zero Trust Wave was that with Illumio was able to cover all of the 5 pillars that I talked about earlier, and it really provides a very simple approach to get started. By tackling the applications and workloads, it allows you to very quickly and very effectively provide additional layers of security around the data and applications. Because the big challenge that we see with Zero Trust is at some point the organization will be breached, right? There will be a bad actor that will come across your borders at some point. And being able to deploy least privilege in a whitelist-based policy allows you to now significantly reduce that attack surface, right? And really limit the exposure and prevent, the bad guys from really accessing the key data in your organization.
Wonderful. All right. So leading into that, our next topic was talking about your 3-stage plan. So this seems like a perfect segue into that. Discover, define, enforce. Can you take us through what the 3-stage plan looks like?
Sure, absolutely. And you know what? One of the biggest challenges I've found when I speak with organizations is oftentimes they struggle with, where do I start? And this is where Discover is a really key place, because what Illumio does is we give you first the ability to see across your entire environment. Our product is called Illumination, but when you deploy Illumination, what Illumio does is it very quickly creates an application dependency map of all your applications and critical workloads. So this gives you the ability to very quickly see where all my applications are and who is connecting across my applications. So it allows you to now discover all your application communications, and then at the same time, it then enables you to very quickly enforce the right set of Zero Trust controls. So it really starts first with visibility, because oftentimes that's the hardest part, right? To find where in my environment am I going to secure? And what we recommend is you should pick and start small with Zero Trust, right? You should pick, for instance, maybe 1 or 2 high-value applications that you want to secure, and then over time, as you start to deploy it, then you gain more experience, and then you can expand that. So the first step is really about discovering your environment, seeing all the applications, providing a full map in terms of who is connecting to what across your applications. And then this will then provide greater insight across what those connections are across your infrastructure, and then this then allows you to then define and enforce the right set of policies. By defining, what I really mean by this is giving the ability to automate that policy creation, because oftentimes it's quite difficult. Organizations oftentimes deploy solutions such as firewalls and even software-defined networks, but the challenge that they oftentimes have is being able to create the optimal policies, so that way when they enforce those granular controls, they're not breaking the application traffic. And so what Illumio does is we are actually leveraging the analytics that's doing the hard work for you. Because what it's doing is it has already mapped your applications. It knows precisely, based upon the application flows, what are those proper communications. And based upon what it sees, it's able for you to program the right set of controls. So that way, when you are now segmenting your applications and your workloads, you're not worrying about it dropping traffic, right? And creating now an issue, for instance, with your users that are trying to access those critical applications. And then the third piece is really about, before you push out those policies, that you have the ability to test that and simulate that within your environment. And one of the challenges I've seen historically is, if you think about how firewall rules are implemented today, oftentimes it may be difficult for an organization to deploy those optimal set of application rules until the application is actually pushed out in production. And sometimes we find that there's a downtime event or an outage, and this oftentimes can impact your network, because now you need to take your network down and adjust your firewall rules to optimally enforce the right set of controls. With Illumio, what we do is we provide the ability to not just see the traffic, but also test that policy. So that way, if it does drop traffic, you would know, and we enable you as an administrator to very quickly operationalize before you push out and enforce any of the policies across those workloads. So it's really about enabling you a set of guardrails that you can extend security controls without breaking your applications, regardless of where your applications are running. So if they're in, for instance, AWS, or you may have applications in Azure or GCP, we can provide a consistent set of controls everywhere across your physical data centers, and as well as across multiple public clouds. And it's irrespective of the workload, whether it's bare metal servers, hypervisors, or even containers. So this three-step approach really allows you to start your approach and really move with confidence to Zero Trust, because what you can do is you can first quickly see what application or what some of the most critical applications are within your environment. Use Illumio to help you to map those application connections. So that way you know what your web servers are doing, who are they talking to across your app servers, and then what are your application and database servers doing across one another. And then through analytics, we're enabling you to now automate and enforce those optimal security controls through whitelist policy.
Excellent. All right, so I think at this point we've gone through a pretty detailed explanation of Zero Trust and looked at some good modeling and some plans for people to help implement it themselves. So, Sam, let's open up to some questions from the audience. So,
sounds great.
Anyone from the audience has any questions, go ahead and go to the Q&A tab and go ahead and type them in. Looks like we have one question here. First question is, what are some specific use cases for Zero Trust? What are some specific use cases that you recommend for Zero Trust?
Yeah. So So one of the first use cases, so what I would recommend is first identify the application that you're looking to secure in your environment. Once you've identified that application, let's say it is a payment processing application, then the next thing I would recommend is for you to deploy and actually create a network map and actually an application dependency of that application. That would then allow you to understand how that particular application is working. And then the next step I would recommend is to then deploy microperimeters through microsegmentation. So ensuring that you've enforced whitelist controls. And by whitelisting the applications, you're now able to ensure that even if a hacker is to break in, let's say it compromises a server in your environment, you've now prevented that user and made it significantly harder for them to move within your environment. So I would start first with the application, then the recommendation would be to create a network map, an application dependency map of how the application is working, then overlay the whitelist controls, so that way you can create a very secure, granular set of segmentation controls around that application. And then once you do that, test that and over time expand with experience. Because the biggest challenge organizations face is when they try to tackle zero trust, oftentimes they may start with multiple applications at the same time. And there lies the challenge, because there's a lot of complexity and difficulty with truly implementing the right set of controls. So start small and expand over time. Excellent.
All right. So it looks like that's all we have for today from a question and answer standpoint. I want to thank Sam for joining us today. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you guys on our next webinar. Thank you very much, and you all have a great weekend.